So welcome, and let's just drop in. Just in a state of openness and prayer to receive the depth of the message and the content. From the story. And be in openness to receive the gift of healing and realization as we journey through it together. Thank you. Okay, so happy to be here. So chapter 4, Volcanos and Honeymoons. And this chapter, again, it just has a lot of deep healing in it. And really witnessing for the first time the maturity that is there through devotion, real devotion to living and practicing the teachings, the spiritual teachings, and transferring that training and awareness to all aspects of life, no matter what's happening. There's also pride that comes up in this section, and another deep wash of daring to expose private thoughts and face the fear of rejection. There's a lovely section in here including the kitty cats, who are part of the whole journey for sure. And more undoing of the self-concept, and also coming towards the end of this chapter is a choice point. It's a very profound experience of seeing the decision, like, do I want to maintain my self-concept, even though it seems impossible in this moment to know how I could possibly let this go. But really facing that choice point, that decision in the mind. Do I want to hold on to this? Or do I want to know who I am? Okay. So this is spring 2005. And we start with a quote from the Course in Miracles from the text. Before a holy relationship, there is no sin. The form of error is no longer seen, and reason, joined with love, looks quietly on all confusion, observing merely, this was a mistake. And then the same atonement you accepted in your relationship corrects the error and lays a part of heaven in its place. Simple, profound guidance. 2 young course teachers on their way from Wisconsin to Florida spent the night with us at the Peace House. As they were leaving, one of them looked directly into my eyes and said, "Kirsten, if I could give you one piece of advice for the spiritual journey, it would be, don't make a decision when you're not feeling at peace." That wisdom was directly from the Holy Spirit, no doubt about it. This simple and profound guidance became a solid reference point for my mind in times of doubt. In the months and years to come, every time that I wanted to leave, and every time that I doubted, it was easy to recognize that I was not at peace. This reference point served as a prompt for me to pause and not act upon or seriously entertain attack thoughts. Rather than drawing conclusions about the cause of my upsets, I inquired within to see the egoic thoughts and beliefs in my mind that were in need of healing. As I practiced with this process, I came to see that following my doubt thoughts and drawing conclusions always took me further away from peace and from David. Each time I went through the process of shifting from anger or fear to a state of reasonable peace, I asked for guidance. And the guidance was never what I thought it would be. I found that there was nothing to do and no action to take based on my fearful thoughts. These reference points were the stabilizing foundation for my mind. They supported me in being able to see that everything was occurring literally for my awakening. My other reference point was to trust David. When I first heard this guidance, it felt very significant. However, I was afraid because I believed I was being asked to put my full faith and trust in a man. I went into prayer and asked what Jesus meant when he told me to trust David. He said, "Trust me through him. Trust David's devotion. Trust that the only purpose he has is awakening, and therefore he is turning to me constantly for everything. David is one who has been given to you as a symbol of being able to trust me." It felt like a leap of faith to trust David, a leap that I would make many, many more times. I didn't realize it at first, but it felt like a leap because I was going through a process of withdrawing my faith from the ego's familiar thought system and placing it in the spirit, in the unknown. Divorce with the spirit. A friend of David's from Argentina invited him to visit in late March to hold a series of gatherings. David immediately included me in the plans. We went ahead and bought our plane tickets. They were the cheapest tickets available and were non-refundable and non-changeable. 2 days before we were due to leave, our host Maria wrote to David saying that she needed to cancel our trip and the planned Course in Miracles gatherings because a family situation had arisen. David called her immediately. She sounded terrible. Her voice had dropped 2 octaves. She poured out her heart. Her beloved husband of 40 years had told her he was leaving her as he was in love with another woman. And to make matters worse, the other woman was their maid, who was a dearly beloved member of their extended family. David knew without a doubt that this trip was guided by the Holy Spirit, and cancelling it was not possible for him. His voice was gentle and certain, as he told her that we couldn't cancel the trip because of our non-refundable tickets. Besides, he said happily, Kirsten and I are coming on a honeymoon. Somehow, this was the perfect thing to say, and Maria's voice lifted back up to its normal pitch. A honeymoon? Oh, that's wonderful. My eyes grew large, watching how the Spirit had answered Maria's call for love through David with a perfect redirection for her mind. Our flight was overnight with 2 stops, and although Argentina was south of Cincinnati, our first flight took us north. As we descended into Chicago around 11:30 p.m., I found myself saying, David, I see us staying in a comfortable hotel tonight. David smiled. Well, our flight is scheduled to continue to Buenos Aires tonight, but we'll see. As we walked through the airport, there was an announcement. US Airways Flight 323 has been delayed due to technical difficulties. Please proceed to customer service for further information. David and I grinned at each other and happily walked to the service desk to stand in line with 100 or so others. Some of the people in the line were complaining about the flight delay, but David and I were happy. We knew that everything was working together, not just for our good, but for our utmost joy. And the joy spread. I couldn't help but share with people that we were on a mission from God, and that the Spirit was taking care of everything. I told them about my feeling that we would stay in a hotel instead of spending the night on a plane, and how miraculous it was that this was all being arranged for us. Our experiences were all lessons in non-judgment. By the time we got to the counter, the staff were in the flow of handing out meal and hotel vouchers. We happily caught the free shuttle to a lovely hotel, took warm baths, and snuggled up in fluffy bathrobes. To top it all off, we gleefully ordered room service with our meal vouchers, apple pie with vanilla ice cream. What abundance! How loved we are! We had a wonderful night's sleep and caught our flight the next morning, arriving fresh for our 2 weeks of gatherings and miracle working. I was deeply grateful to be shown how taken care of we are by God. Like softly spoken poetry in my mind, I remembered some of Jesus's quotes from the Bible and the Course. Put the kingdom of heaven first, and all things shall be added unto you. When you've learned how to decide with God, all decisions become as easy and as right as breathing. There is no effort, and you will be led as gently as if you were being carried down a quiet path in summer. Do you really believe you can plan for your safety and joy better than He can? You need merely cast your cares upon Him, because He careth for you. You are His care, because He loves you. Maria and her soon-to-be ex-husband came to pick us up together. Regardless of whether he loved another woman or not, she loved him deeply and was absolutely set on having the spirit of forgiveness lead the way through every step that they were to take together. I had never experienced this before, and I was struck by her maturity and devotion to true holy relationship. She was looking deeply at the belief in abandonment and betrayal while staying the course and refusing to turn away from love. Maria was a living demonstration of forgiveness as she openly explored the dissolution of her marriage and family situation in an atmosphere of prayer. Again, I felt the depth of where the course was leading. We spent the week with Maria and her family, and then David and I headed south to hold several gatherings in rural areas before heading further south to our honeymoon destination. I feel like a handbag. An uncomfortable feeling had started to arise within me during the last few gatherings with David. All of the teaching was pouring through him while I hardly spoke. I sat on a chair beside him, sometimes closing my eyes or gazing around looking at the audience. Sometimes I didn't know where to look. When a participant asked a question, I would often hear something that I felt would be very helpful to say, but in my perception, David always answered so quickly that I didn't have a chance to speak. And then, when he would turn to me, he would often give such a long introduction to my experience that I didn't know what to say when he asked me to talk further about it. After the second gathering in the rural areas of Argentina, my annoyance was arising. I feel like an accessory to the mystic. David is the mystic. Everyone wants to hear him speak, and I'm just sitting on this chair like a handbag. As usual, I had no choice but to share the egoic thoughts with David. There was no way I could pretend and put on some kind of show for the next gathering. His sincere response was, "Oh, you can start the next gathering off then." I immediately felt fearful and knew that wasn't really the answer I'd wanted to hear. I didn't feel confident enough to start the gathering myself. I was well aware that David's presence somehow brought everyone into a shared experience of the depth. Sharing the thoughts felt good, and although there wasn't a solution in form, something within me relaxed. During the next gathering, I felt very content sitting beside David. I had dropped back into the experience that it was all for me, and I loved listening to every word that came out of his mouth. At one point I spoke, and at the end of the gathering, a beautiful devoted spiritual teacher looked at us both and said softly, "She has the same gift as you do, David." Beaming, David replied, "Oh yes, she does." I have no idea what I said during that gathering, but I did know that my sense of competition and pride had disappeared. The honeymoon and the volcano. After the gatherings, we travelled south to Miramar on the coast. David was delighted as we arrived at the lovely Oasis of Peace Hotel for our 4-day honeymoon by the ocean. I, on the other hand, was not filled with delight. I was suffering from holding on to private thoughts, and the longer I held back from speaking them to David, the wider the gulf between us was becoming. Every time David mentioned the word honeymoon, I felt the hit of the private thoughts that were building up within my mind. When we were with other people or holding gatherings, I was drawn into being of service to the Spirit, and the ego thoughts faded completely out of awareness. However, when we were alone, they would come right back into my awareness, blocking love completely. After 2 days, I felt quite separate from David, as I still hadn't shared my attack thoughts. I kept trying to forgive them and hand them over to the Spirit, but nothing was changing. On the 3rd night, we went around the corner to a little French restaurant where we were the only customers. David continued to shine and glow as if there was no problem at all, but it had reached an unbearable point for me. I couldn't continue another moment. And so I spoke all of the thoughts that were in my mind. Horrible, judgmental, and embarrassing thoughts about teeth, breath, bodily noises, bathroom towels, clothes, and fashion. David wore knee-high white socks with sandals, which was not cool where I came from. I knew I couldn't hold anything back, so I let it all out. I told him that I didn't feel like this was a honeymoon. It didn't feel at all romantic. And I felt like I was a liar and a fake every time he mentioned the word. I told him that I felt like I couldn't say anything because I didn't really know what any of it was for. And what was the point in saying any of it, since I should just be able to change my mind about my thoughts? I expressed how the thoughts came up every day, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. Intuitively, the staff kept a safe distance as I spoke to David. It seemed so personal and horrible, but I felt that I truly had nothing to lose. After all, I was almost at the end of my 3-month stay in the US, so I was due to return to New Zealand soon anyway. I was sure this was the end, and David would agree that I had done my best and the relationship would be over. But instead, he reached across the table and took my hands. He looked deeply into my eyes and said, "Now we can begin the relationship." I couldn't believe it. Tears fell down my cheeks as a wave of innocence flooded through me. Once again, it was the total opposite of what I feared would happen. Our relationship depended on me daring to be transparent, daring to share the thoughts when they arose, daring to face the fear of rejection and punishment of some kind. When I withdrew from David in my mind, I was effectively ending the relationship anyway. Once again, I saw that I didn't really have a choice. I either said yes to this holy relationship and the Spirit's purpose, or I pull away and cut myself off from my connection with the Spirit and David. And knowing this, I felt more confident about just going for it. The waitress then brought our menus, approaching our table with a big smile and loving eyes. David and I had a wonderful evening, and the rest of our time in Argentina was a joyful, loving, soft experience. Everyone we met reflected the depth of love I had fallen back into. We laughed as everyone we saw, from teenagers outside the music store, to policemen on duty, to dogs on the streets, greeted each other with multiple kisses on the cheeks. As we flew back to the US, we were deeply grateful for all of the healing that had occurred on our trip. I was glowing with love and happiness as I approached the immigration officer to show him my passport. I told him that I only had a few days left with my visa waiver status, and although I was due to return to New Zealand soon, I would love to stay longer if it was possible. He told me that he couldn't extend a visa waiver, and he asked me what I was doing in the US. I explained that I was recovering from a head injury and had devoted my life to God and forgiveness. I said that I was part of a ministry and was accompanying my friend on some of his travels, and how wonderful it all was. The immigration officer began to glow as he said, "Well, I can't extend your visa waiver, but I can give you a new one." No wonder we were meant to go to Argentina. Once again, I was amazed at how the Spirit was orchestrating everything without my effort. With the biggest smile, I skipped through to the baggage carousel to meet David. The purring ones. It was a wonderful feeling arriving back at the Peace House, knowing that I could stay in the US for another 3 months. I loved the fact that I was not personally in charge of making anything happen. The Spirit was in control of the plan of my life, and He was making everything clear and obvious, including staying in the US and continuing to be with David. I was being shown the way, step by step. Tripod, a little 3-legged tortoiseshell cat, and her sister Angel were living with us. They were stray kittens that had been found nearby. Angel loved being outdoors all year round. As long as David played doorman, she would happily go in and out of the front door repeatedly. We laughed at how sincere she was about wanting to be exactly where she was not. Tripod was highly sensitive and easily frightened, but she responded quickly to love. She lived mostly in David's room, basking in the glow of their holy relationship. Meditating on his bed, hopping to his desk, and rubbing at his chair legs until he dropped his hand to her to receive her love and affection. She had embraced me immediately, initiating love feasts whenever I was near her. She had so much love to extend, she could hardly contain herself. She often woke me up, nuzzling into my hair and purring. When we watched movies, the cats would reflect the theme of the film. During a relationship movie, they curled up on the back of the sofas, purring contentedly. Whilst watching The Matrix, we were stunned by the acrobatic show they put on. Racing around the sanctuary, taking turns, chasing each other, and flying in and out of sight around the furniture. At one point, they were bounding up to each other. Angel reached out a paw, batting Tripod across the cheek, just as Neo and Morpheus had been doing in their training program in the movie. Tripod attempted to bat Angel back, but only having 3 legs, her little nub just wiggled around, giving Angel the advantage. I feel like I'm there. Angel crept. We watched in total joy as they took off again, disappearing behind the sofas. By now, we had paused the movie since the girls had our full attention. Angel crept to the center of the sanctuary in slow motion. Tripod, seeing her chance, hopped out from behind a chair and headed towards Angel as fast as she could. Angel leapt straight up in the air with her legs and paws outstretched. She had turned into Trinity from the Matrix. We gasped in amazement as Tripod, in total confusion, looked around for her highly skilled sister, not knowing where she had gone. So Angel was like up. Angel landed beside Tripod, batted her a couple of times, and then took off, leaving us to watch the rest of the movie in glee. Fitness and the body. As I deepened in my relationship with the Spirit, I was loosening from the belief that my body was my identity or my home. I listened to a talk of David's called Concern for the Body, where he said that by being concerned about it, I was reinforcing my belief in separation. Since my head injuries, I hadn't been to a gym or gone running at all. I often took walks, and when there was a pool or a beach nearby, I went swimming. Although I was no longer walking or swimming to consciously improve or maintain a level of physical fitness, I had to admit that the beliefs about those things were still there in my mind. I had already given over control of my personal hygiene routines to Spirit, and I felt the same fear in the pit of my stomach at the thought of giving over my attention to physical fitness. The thought of being trapped in an overweight, lethargic body was horrifying to me. I watched the fearful thoughts turn to blame and began projecting them onto David. Do I have to look at these beliefs now? I'm not David, so why do I have to do what he does? I like to take walks. They're good for me. I'll die if I can never take another walk. I felt like I was being controlled and told what to do. I was afraid of not being allowed to decide for myself. I sat with these thoughts, allowing the fear, and invited the Spirit into my mind. I want to see. Help me to see what is beneath this. When I prayed and felt into the truth of the experience, I realized that there was still a push, a drive at times with my walks. Sometimes the walks were gentle and spacious, but I had to admit that at other times they were not gentle, and their purpose was not loving. I could see how I had been lying to myself by pretending that what I was doing was caring for myself, when the ego's reinforcement of body identification was right there, clear as day. It was no longer disguised, and I could no longer lie to myself. Beyond all else, I wanted the peace of God, to know my true identity as Spirit. A sneaky, justifying thought flashed across my mind. Okay, I'll give this over to the Spirit, but I can always take a walk for the purpose of forgiveness. Damn it. I still wanted to be able to keep going for walks under the pretense of a spiritual purpose. I still felt the split. I didn't fully trust that I could let it go. I was still afraid. Finally, I took a deep breath and gave it all over to the Spirit. I felt that letting go of my identification with the body might take a while. However, I'd noticed that the more I dived into the Spirit's purpose and was around David, who was such a clear demonstration of one purpose, the more the areas of my life that were laced with the ego's motivation were brought to my attention. My mind felt like a sieve that was being gently shaken. All that was soft and fine could fall through, but any little rocks were brought into view, so they could be removed. One day, I was particularly stressed with ego resistance and was about to go for a walk. But David told me that I was to stay and talk it through with him. He told me there was nothing magical or causative about walking, and I could do the healing right there, sitting in that very place that I felt so desperate to leave. It was intense, but I was willing. And after exposing the fears, the desire to walk dissolved away in peace. Identification with the body and the desire to be fit was to be an ongoing mind training practice for years to come. I'm happy to say that walking and swimming continued to be used as ways of joining with mighty companions, and I had many mystical experiences in nature. Just as with personal hygiene, this area of my mind was absorbed into the totality of a prayerful life. And despite the ego's fears, the lesson was that there was no sacrifice. The only thing that was being given up was the pain. I want to be eaten by a bear. After a couple of weeks at the Peace House, David and I were in our car, headed north on a road trip to Vermont. Until this day, David had happily joined me for what I still felt were my essential afternoon siestas. Usually we managed to work siesta time into our travel schedule wherever we went, either by stopping in rest areas or arriving at our destination in time for a nap. However, on this day, we were at least 3 hours from our destination, and it was nearing 2 p.m. I noticed the typical thoughts that arose within my mind when I began to feel the familiar heaviness, and it seemed like my rest time was threatened. If we don't stop soon, I will start to get a headache. I'm going to fade, and I need to have a rest. I won't make it for the gathering tonight. I asked David to pull the car over. I could sense that he wasn't in full agreement, but I was clear and firm in my request. After all, I was still recovering from a head injury, and he knew it was what I needed. After not seeing a rest area for some time, David pulled the car over on the side of the road, and we attempted to rest. We reclined the front seats and lay on our sides. David's large 6-foot frame hardly fit in the tiny hybrid car, and he shuffled around, unable to stretch his legs out at all. Vehicles flew by, shaking the car, and it was anything but restful. The awareness that this was not the Spirit's plan was like a deafening, unspoken sound that filled the vehicle. After 10 minutes, David sat up, adjusting his seat, and said we would continue driving. He said it wasn't restful, that he had a gathering that night, and that our hosts were expecting us at 5:30 for dinner. We were to continue, and I could rest in the car as he drove. I protested that the car was too low to the ground, and I felt jarred by the potholes. I was worried about being exhausted by the time we got there. However, David was clearly following the Spirit's guidance, and I had no choice. I felt terrible, trapped. I wondered what I was doing there anyway, in a crazy little car that David had bought simply to save gas. I was in total disagreement with him about everything in that moment. Then the dark thoughts turned to hurt. David obviously didn't love me. If my mother Jackie was here, she'd find us a hotel to rest in if that was what I needed. I kept my eyes closed for the rest of the drive. My mind still felt stuck in a dark cloud when we arrived at our host's retreat center. David was ready to join with them, but I told him I was going to rest. I lay down in the bedroom, but I felt anything but restful. So instead, I slipped out the back door and went for a walk. As I walked through the pine forest, I thought, I hope I get eaten by a bear, and then David will feel sorry for not loving me. I walked for another 5 minutes and then suddenly stopped. Oh my God, what was I doing? Wanting to be eaten by a bear? Convinced that David didn't love me? This is ridiculous. I had to question the belief that David didn't love me. What if he had been right? That we were supposed to keep driving? I saw the protesting thought arise immediately. But I'm still recovering from a head injury and he's supposed to be supporting me. But then I asked myself, is that what I really want? To still be recovering from a head injury and be dependent on afternoon naps? The answer was immediate. No, I don't want this anymore. I didn't know how recovery could be possible. I had tried everything I could to heal myself of my post-accident symptoms, from physical therapies, meditation, pushing my way through, to surrendering to them. Finally, I had accepted that my symptoms might be a lifelong condition. Clearly, I had no control over them. It felt like a critical eye of the needle moment. I couldn't imagine how healing could occur or how there wouldn't be painful consequences if I missed my afternoon siestas. But what if this was the day? What if the Spirit really was in charge and this wasn't what it seemed? I had a decision to make. To continue to try to protect myself and be right about what I thought I needed, or to decide for God and to put myself and all of my situations into His hands. My decision was clear. I did want to be over this. I did want to be healed. I turned back towards the retreat center and felt a lightness and joy re-entering my mind. I could still feel a faint, familiar sensation of afternoon heaviness in the background, but I happily decided to no longer let that feeling be a reason to make decisions. From now on, I told the Spirit, I give my rest time to you. And I trust that if I am to rest, you will guide me. Oh, how simple. I found myself skipping back to share the good news with David and everyone at the center. I opened the door and they were all sitting at a large dinner table in a soft, loving glow, as if awaiting my perfectly timed arrival. The soft glow remained throughout the entire weekend. I felt a quiet strength growing within me, and I felt held in the arms of God. I felt more deeply joined than ever with David in a glorious purpose. These experiences were showing me that I didn't know my own best interests. The Spirit was guiding me through this awakening process, step by step, for this learning. I was so grateful for David's true empathy and non-compromising approach to following the Spirit's guidance. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining, everyone.